Good morning and welcome to PAC's FinTech series on cryptocurrency. I'm Dean Miller, the president and CEO of PAC, and we have a really interesting discussion for you this morning. I know many of you cannot wait to learn more about this space, as can I. We are grateful and thankful for our sponsors of the PAC FinTech series. This is the first in a series that will happen over the course of this program year. And specifically, I want to thank Baker Tilly, Vanguard, and SEI. As you know, this is a webcast, so please stay muted. All the participants are off video, but please ask questions. This is a big group, so yes, you could raise your hand, but the most effective way is going to be to put your question in chat. We will monitor it throughout and ensure that it gets answered. We'll go to about 9:30, 9:35, and then we are going to jump over once again to the Rehm virtual networking room. That link will be provided in chat toward the end of the program, and I'll call it out so that you know when it's time to click that link. And it's there where you'll be able to join tables, talk to the speakers, discuss the topics further for about 30 minutes. With that, I want to hand the program over to our moderator. Michelle Lowry is the TD Bank Professor of Finance at Drexel University, and we are grateful for her participation here this morning for Drexel's support of PAC. And welcome, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Dean. Thanks for the invitation to be here. Let me second what Dean said. It's really a great group of panelists that we have. So I'm just going to start by introducing everybody very briefly and then turn it over to them to talk more about what they do, since they know much more about it. But let me start with just a quick overview of everybody. We have people ranging from the startup space to more developed companies, the investor space to regulators. So we really have multiple perspectives here. First, we have Dori Yankelewitz. He is the CEO of Charitas. He's the co-founder of Charitas, and Charitas is a really cool company. It's a social impact company. And what they do is they use blockchain technology to raise money for nonprofits. They've got partnerships with NFT artists. They've already raised $50,000, more than that, for charity. So he's going to talk about some of the cool things that they're doing in that space. More established perspective, we have Adele Rehm. She's the director of the innovation portfolio at VERTEX. So what is that? They're focused on driving disruptive commercial innovation through VX3. And I'm going to let her talk about the details, but the basic objective is to accelerate new concepts to customers, a heavy emphasis on innovation, ventures, R&D. And she's got a great perspective because she works for both industry giants and startup companies. Okay, then turning to the investor space, we have Russ Kliman. He's the global leader of Sei Ventures. Sei Ventures is Sei's corporate venture capital group. So he sees many different companies in this space. And so he can talk about trends and what companies are dealing with and sort of what the hot areas are right now. They have a pretty broad perspective on FinTech, wealth management, capital markets, insurance, banking, credit and lending, cryptocurrency, digital assets. It goes on and on. There are more. And then finally, for the regulator perspective, we have Julapa Jagtiani. She is the senior economic advisor and economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. She's participated in several key supervisory policy projects and has published influential research articles in top journals. Her most recent research focuses on emerging issues around FinTech, the roles of alternative data in credit decisions, recent credit performance across alternative lenders, and various regulatory issues. So she's going to be able to give both sort of the research perspective as well as the regulator perspective. Okay, so that gives you kind of an overview of what we have and different people's perspectives, but let each of them tell you a little bit more in depth what they do. So Adele and Dori, you are both working at companies that operate in this space. Could you each tell us just a little bit more about your company and what you specifically focus on? And let's start with Dori and then go to Adele. So Dori, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Firstly, I want to thank you for your warm introduction and thank Dean for having all of us. And I also want to thank everybody for coming here and attending. So my name is Dori. As Michelle mentioned, I'm the CEO of Charitas. So what we do is basically utilize all the technology that blockchain gives us to raise as much money for nonprofit organizations. So we started with our own cryptocurrency called the Charitas token. And we basically take a bite out of every single transaction that happens, put it into our charity fund and use it to support nonprofits across the globe. The Charitas token has single-handedly raised over $50,000 to charity in about 3 months' time, a little over. And our next project that we're working on involves NFTs. So we're going to get into NFTs and kind of what they are later on in the program. But we're basically looking to build the infrastructure that allows an artist to say, hey, I have an NFT and I want to sell it, and I want to allocate a certain amount to charity, which happens quite often. And we want to make that process as easy as possible. The money will go directly to the nonprofit organization. However much they decide to keep for themselves will go directly to them. And on the consumer side, individual will be able to pick which nonprofit they want to support. And it'll basically just be a very streamlined, easy process. So that is kind of the next iteration of where we're heading because of the explosive growth that's going on with NFTs.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dori. Obviously, a lot of things to come back there and talk about more, and we'll be hitting a lot of those as we go into more detail here. But before we go into that, Adele, let me go over to you. Could you give us kind of the big picture of what your company is doing, and then a bit more specifically what you work on?
Great, thanks, Michelle, and thanks everyone for having me. So I'm with VERTEX Inc., and I'm excited to lead our innovation portfolio. We really look at disruptive technology from a problem space as well as the tech perspective. So really bridging that gap, right? Everyone talks blockchain, everyone talks cryptocurrency, which is so exciting here, especially with the panelists today, to hear from different perspectives. So given that VERTEX Inc. is very much in the compliance, FinTech, RegTech space, especially with any kind of transaction you buy, if you're not familiar, when you go and purchase anything, there's a small little tax calculation. And we're really at the corner of how commerce is done since we're involved in those areas. And so blockchain and cryptocurrency, you have to talk about it, right? People are talking about it. PayPal and Venmo just offered it, right? The consumer push is there and understanding it. This panel, what a perspective from investors. So here at VERTEX Inc. and specifically in Breakthrough, we commercialize new disruptive technologies to not only help our core customers, but also to help customers with problems they don't even know they have yet. So really excited for this panel today, really aligned with where we're heading. And again, great perspective. So thanks for having me.
I love that last part that you said, Adele. I feel like that's so much what this space is about, right? Sort of trying to meet demand before we even know what that is. So the fact that that's what you're trying to do, I just think is really neat. Russ, let's get your perspective. So you're working with all kinds of different companies in this space. You want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I mean, I think for those unfamiliar with SThe, we provide, 3 core things to the marketplace. We provide technology platforms, business process outsourcing, and investment management to some of the largest financial institutions globally, as well as in the US market. We supply these platforms and outsource processing to banks and wealth managers, financial advisors, and investment managers. And so certainly we are at the tip of the spear in those industries, really having their end consumers, their clients, really talking about digital assets, crypto assets, and how might we enable them to really support that through what I'll call the entire value chain, from front office experience to, middle office and to back office, and then obviously, custody and street side settlement capabilities. And so within Sei Ventures, our charter is really to invest in those emergent and startup companies that are really in the space. And as you alluded to in the introduction, we look at a very broad spectrum, but very specific to the topic today is really looking at all of the different types of companies that are looking to address a particular item or issue within that value chain. So some of them are very narrow, so they may be around FX trading. Others may be more around settlement or regulatory and compliance or portfolio management. And so it's really a full spectrum. And so as I'll say, kind of the digital asset and crypto maturity model evolves, there's players that are looking to fulfill particular gaps in the marketplace that either incumbent players that may not have the capabilities today and may be too heavy of a lift to build it, are looking to partner with these fintechs that are doing some amazing things and have been in this space for quite a while and have fairly mature solutions. So it's a pretty exciting, but also everybody kind of sounds like and quacks like the same thing. So one of the big challenges from a ventures perspective is, parsing through the hype and getting to the reality and kind of seeing what some amazing founders and companies are doing in the market.
Thanks, Russ. That's perfect. And again, I feel like it's the same with everybody. So much to come back and follow up on here, right? I'm sure so many people want to know, well, what is back office? I hear this phrase all the time. What does it even mean? So again, we'll come back and follow up a little bit on that. But before we do that, Julapa, let me turn it over to you, sort of the regulator in the room. So you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for including me on this panel. I have to remind everyone that everything I said today is my own view and not the view of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. So as Michelle said in the introduction, that I have been working around FinTech, which is a much broader term than cryptocurrencies. A lot of cryptocurrency is just part of it. So my focus has been on, as you said, alternative data, credit access. But Federal Reserve mission includes not only monetary policy, but also financial stability and consumer protection. And all these new FinTech innovations are affecting how we also, safety and soundness in the banking system is another one of the responsibilities. And a lot of banks, as Russ said, a partnership is just everywhere with FinTech. And some of the banks partner with FinTech and may not understand what is the algorithm, what is behind their decision, and what's inside the black box. So as we are, as a bank regulator, we also need to understand, really look deep into what's really inside the black box and how each decisions are made. We also look into the data sharing, how we protect consumers, because we know that a lot of partnership and a lot of data aggregators and everything, all the data on our phone and online footprints, everything is being collected and being shared, and we don't know anything about what is being done with our information. So we work on that as well. That's what we care about. And also this partnership that involves different new FinTech startups, some of them, and we also are issuing different guidelines on how banks should manage their third-party risk management. And related to more closely to this is central bank digital currency, which is also, as you heard, China banned cryptocurrency transactions because it's competing with their own CBDC, central bank digital currency. And at the Federal Reserve, Boston Fed is partnering with MIT, for example, to explore different implementation options if we want to consider issuing CBDC. Of course, it's a long way from now, and we have no desire to be fast at doing this.
Great, Julapa, thanks again. Many things. I like the word black box. I feel like that's sort of the signature word in this space. We're all trying to figure out what's in the black box. And that's kind of part of the goal today, right? To unravel some of the black box and figure out what this all means. But keeping things a little bit bigger picture for a few more minutes. There's growth on so many dimensions in this space. And I'm sure you all, everybody in this room and in the entire session today has probably 10 things that they think of as, oh, this is so exciting right now. But I'd love to ask you just to pick one thing, right? So what's one thing that you're particularly excited about right now? For those of you working in a company, something you're working on, or for those of you working with other companies, something you see another company do. Adele, let me start with you. You work with a range of companies, which I think is particularly interesting, from the startup to more established. So you're seeing a lot of different perspectives here. You want to spend a few minutes talking about one thing that you're particularly excited about right now.
Thanks, Michelle. That's really hard. One thing, there's about 20,
I know.
right? At any time.
Flip a coin. Flip a six-sided coin. I don't care. Pick one.
Right. Everything from, working with smart contracts on the blockchain before, such an exciting space, but in cryptocurrency in particular, love what you said about the range of companies. And for us, I think sessions like this are such an impactful part, right? Even for me personally, hearing different perspectives, because it's such a quickly evolving space, and the person, what you want at the end of it is so different, right? From a consumer versus how, companies are really evolving in this space, making, a plan, maybe investing in this. And then things what, Dori on the panel is doing today, right? We're in this kind of ecosystem that's so rapidly changing. Educational opportunities and listening to other perspectives for us is key, especially as we looked at places where we can really innovate and solve pain points. It's different across the board, right? And now you have this perspective with regulation, because wherever this is regulation. It's about making the most informed choices that are good for you personally and working with those advisors, right? Because again, what's the tax obligation you have at the end of the day when doing anything in cryptocurrency? How is that going to evolve? And so for us, it's about listening to all the different viewpoints, all the different industry perspectives on it. So we've been really going deep in listening mode in this, as well as learning, because I think no matter what solution we come up to, there's going to be a huge, if we go into this space at all, right? How do you really solve a problem that touches so many industries, and how do you really listen to the users to design that? And so for us, it's been attending panels with subject matter experts like today, as well as listening to our customer base and looking at trends for the future. And so for us, if I'm most excited, I'm thinking of how many solutions are really going to come out of it when you look at a broad industry perspective, because again, the needs and the applications, it's so varied. So
I'd love to follow up on one thing. I'm sure some of our audience members probably know a lot about this, but maybe others don't. There's a lot of people that think that smart contracts is where a lot of the potential lies in this space. And that's true both in the cryptocurrency space and in the broader blockchain space. Could you just talk a little bit for people that maybe aren't familiar, what is a smart contract and why is that such a high potential item?
Absolutely, thanks. I had spent a long time in my career with industrial players, specifically in manufacturing, and a large amount of invoices and a lot of money exchanging hands and a lot of stressed out accounting departments with huge past dues, right? So if we had one source of truth where you could actually transact and reduce the time in between, not only is it a win for the people on the side of doing the accounting, it's a huge win for the company as a whole to be able to say there is one point of truth, this happens, it's transacted and we're done. So it increases the speed of business, as well as alleviates a lot of pain points for a lot of people out there who are just doing a massive amount of paperwork still, even in a virtual world. So very interesting space, a ton of applications, but specifically from my time with industrial manufacturing, huge opportunity for time savings and solving a lot of pain points.
So is it fair to say I could summarize an example of a smart contract as being, if item X arrives in the warehouse, then automatically this bill will be paid out of my bank account 10 days later, unless somebody overrides it? Would that be a fair example?
Exactly, Michelle. That's a great way to look at it. Simple level, and especially once you think of that at scale, it's an impressive technology that can be leveraged in multiple ways.
Perfect. So for everybody out there working in a lot of different industries, you can think about what type of thing could be automated in that, analogous to that. That's the potential to put something on the blockchain and save costs, which is of course the goal for so many of us. But let me switch now. Dori, you're up. So you work in a very specific space. I know, having talked to you before, you're very excited about it. So can you talk a little bit about what you see in your world as this sort of high growth potential, what you're most excited about?
Yes, for sure. So one of the things that a lot of cryptocurrency companies have to answer is, what are people doing with your token and your cryptocurrency? Because from a regulatory standpoint, people can't just buy your cryptocurrency and hope it goes up in value. You actually have to prove that people are buying it to take certain action with it. And so for our case—
Dori, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I think everybody's on board with cryptocurrency, but when you say token, could you just define that for the audience so we make sure we all understand?
So a token is a cryptocurrency. So there are kind of two kinds of cryptocurrencies. There's a coin and there's a token. And a coin has a blockchain behind it. So Ethereum is a coin. Bitcoin is a coin. They're coins because they have an entire specific blockchain backing their cryptocurrency. A token is basically borrowing rent on another blockchain. So our token is basically renting from the Binance blockchain. And we utilize their blockchain to have a cryptocurrency, and they provide us the infrastructure and the technology to have our own cryptocurrency. So that would make us a token and them a coin. So that's that's the basic definition. So as I said, a lot of cryptocurrency companies are answering the question of, what are people doing with their cryptocurrency? And you really can't— I mean, you can, people are doing it, but you're not supposed to just launch a cryptocurrency and promise people that, you know, things are going to happen and it's going to go up in value. That is like, you know, a big no-no in the space if you're following the rules. So, you know, in our case, the utility that we have with our cryptocurrency at this moment is the idea of using it to dictate where we send our charitable funds. So people in our community get to vote on, you know, because they hold our token, they get to vote where we're, you know, what nonprofit organizations we're going to donate to. And so I think as a lot of cryptocurrencies are answering this question, it gets pretty exciting because everyone's coming up with different new utilities, different advantages for having their cryptocurrency. And that's kind of what I'm excited about, to see that question answered in all the different forms and ways, because it's a question that everyone needs to answer. And the more innovative you become when answering that question, the more your cryptocurrency will stand out. And so that's, for me, one of the very exciting things in the space as it grows is, you know, what is going to be the next iteration of innovation and utility for everybody's respective cryptocurrencies?
Super interesting. Thanks. Let me, again, just follow up on one thing that I think has applications in a lot of different frameworks. You mentioned that people vote in terms of what charity they want to go to. So when I think voting, I don't think doing it via a token. How does that work?
So you basically, for a very tiny fee, it'll be like under 5 cents or less than that. You basically are using your cryptocurrency and you're clicking a button and you're sending it to us, and it is counting that as a vote. So that is the most basic form, and that's a development project that, you know, we're working on right now. We host our voting situation via our social media platforms, but, you know, we want to make it as easy as possible to vote, and we have to have a utility for our token. And that's the first of what will hopefully be many. You know, we want to create an environment where people can use our cryptocurrency to plant trees, to offset CO2, various different innovations and ways to kind of use the Charitas token, which is built around charity, to benefit philanthropy. And so that's, you know, the most basic one is voting, because one of the big things that I think people overlook in cryptocurrency is community. And so giving our community a say and a voice in, you know, the way we're donating the money that they're helping us raise. You know, when someone transacts with our cryptocurrency, we're taking a bite and we're putting it into our charity fund. So I think it makes sense that they get to have a voice, and using our cryptocurrency to cast that vote, I think is really exciting.
I love the overlap between sort of the nonprofit angle and the voting, right? We don't tend to think of this as nonprofit space, but what you're doing is so unique. And the voting is something that has applications in so many different contexts. There are countries that have put their shareholder voting on the blockchain. It's a way to aggregate a lot of information in a more efficient manner. So again, lots of potentials and lots of different frameworks. So Russ, you're going to give us the big overview. So if Adele had trouble thinking of one high growth, I imagine you're you're struggling even more, but I've given you more time to think about it. So
yeah, so I think I'll raise it up a little bit higher and look at it more at a macro level and say, to me, the biggest excitement is this broad term of kind of DeFi or decentralized finance. And I think that transcends into all different experiences, whether you're a consumer buying goods and services, or whether you are, a company who's issuing equity, all different dimensions of the financial service ecosystem, decentralized finance. And that to me is the most exciting opportunity, because it's exciting and scary, because it's really democratizing the exchange of value and ownership, and removing the proverbial middleman that has existed for hundreds of years in certain instances. And so I think that's the biggest opportunity. As you unpack that, I think the simplest example is if you're looking to pay a friend money in today's world, it's going through your bank, and even if you're using Venmo or PayPal or other infrastructure, other rails, then it goes through your friend's bank, and then they ultimately get the cash in their hand. In a decentralized world, that doesn't exist any longer. The proverbial middlemen don't exist. And when you think about something like equity issuance, and we're even seeing the emergence of some of that transforming even today's world, just getting a glimmer of it, and how disruptive people are freaking out about when a company decides to go around the traditional IPO type of process. And you think about all of the layers that exist within that industry, and that's getting a little more to home in terms of where SEI lives as an organization. But a company goes to issue something, they're dealing with a dealer, they're dealing with an investment bank, they're working with the SEC, they syndicate the securities, they work with a custodian. Then you have the DTC who settles those transactions, and then you have distribution, brokerage, mutual funds, institutional investors. All of these individuals take a toll or a tax along that value chain before it ultimately gets to the consumer. And in the new world, all of those individual items gets back to the issuance, where we're talking about, tokens and coins. If you have now in the new world, a company wants to issue equity, they can just issue a company coin. And that company coin can now be sold in the marketplace directly to a consumer. And so all of those elements, when you talk about distributed finance and a democratization, and allowing the average person on the street, not on Wall Street, but on the street, to be able to now get the issuance of that coin directly, that really that is both scary and opportunistic when you think about all of the regulatory things to keep people safe, not taken advantage of, and all of the other elements, tax, reporting, and all the other elements that come into play. I think that's both exciting and great opportunities. And I think as we think about the evolution in this space, I think that's where I think, my language is like there's a maturity model relative to kind of the digital and crypto evolution. And I parallel very much to kind of the internet, where it was kind of like, back in the day, everybody thought AOL was the internet. And I think today, everybody thinks Bitcoin's the internet. Bitcoin is the definition of digital and crypto if you're not in the space. And I think Bitcoin, and I'll use Jamie Dimon's kind of, commentary today, it's not relevant. Well, is AOL relevant today? Well, AOL may have been the one kind of out in front and got the arrows in the back and ultimately established kind of mainstreaming and acceptance, but it's no longer around. And I think, things like Bitcoin and those that may exist today will look quite different in the future. So I think relevancy is I think, self-defined. I think right now it's incredibly relevant because it's creating conversation and making it part of the vernacular of the everyday consumer. But I think if you fast forward 5 years from now, 7 years from now, I think you're going to see a very different evolution in that maturity model, where things like a Bitcoin become less relevant to the conversation, and it's more around digital assets, coins, tokenization, and other types of elements.
So maybe Jamie Dimon's not wrong when he says Bitcoin is worthless, but maybe that's not really the question we should be asking.
Correct. And I think that's where, I don't have responsibility for the asset management space, but I think just at a personal level, I think, in today's world, I kind of, it's a collectible. Mm-hmm. And I think it has value and it goes up and down in value, but it's no different than a baseball card. it goes up and down in value, and it's interesting because there's scarcity and there's interest and there's hype around it, and there's kind of this momentum. But I think, again, no different than kind of the AOLs of the day. I think, again, when you fast forward, I think the relevancy of Bitcoin, while that language that kind of made it mainstream and part of the conversation and was the tipping point for traditional organizations all of a sudden step up and start paying attention and saying, how do we build an infrastructure that allows everybody to participate as an asset class, as a solution into the marketplace through traditional banking services, payments, debit cards, all the way through to investment management and the like. How does it participate? So it may have been the catalyst, but it won't be the betting people are saying it won't be the longevity element of it.
I completely agree. And I would just like to highlight the point. I think a lot of times when people see it's a cryptocurrency panel, a lot of people think, oh, it's a Bitcoin panel. And that's not true, right? So cryptocurrency, as Dori explained perfectly, like it includes so many different things. It's coins, it's tokens. We have the decentralized finance and all the potential there, as Russ was talking about. And Russ, I'd love to follow up on the DeFi sort of subject a bit more. If I'm going to put my investment banker hat on, I'm going to say, oh, but I, as an investment banker, provide a lot of value. I tell you which companies going public are good and which ones are bad and which you should invest in and which are, big fraud stories. Is there a way that the DeFi can overcome this? Because this is a big challenge.
Well, to me, I think it boils down to providing value. If you're there just to collect the tax as some element kind of passes through your infrastructure, but you're not adding true value, not protecting consumers on a regulatory side perspective, not holding organizations accountable to following the rules as kind of Dori kind of outlined. I think you need to provide value. And I think it really probably re-emphasizes the notion of both advice and wealth management advice. If you're an end consumer, how do I get the right kind of advice and the right type of alternative asset classes to be participating in, to the investment bankers who are providing value into that solution offering. I think when you're just there as kind of a pass-through entity and you collect your toll as the thing follows through, I think that DeFi will help highlight those lack of value add within the value chain. Mm-hmm. And I think that was where it will truly materialize.
So you raised consumer protection. So of course I need to go to Julapa now because this is what regulators spend much of their time. Sure. I was going to ask you sort of generally as a regulator, we've heard from Adele, Dori, and Russ what to be most excited about. You, I imagine, could tell us what we should be most worried about, but also maybe talk a little bit about the consumer protection issues as well. You're on mute, Julapa.
Yeah, sure. My generator is running now. So, I wanted to actually, if you don't mind, I would add a little bit more from what people have already heard from Russ and Dori and Adele. So, as you said, Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency. And so if we ask how many cryptocurrencies are there, I have been I think it's not only exciting and great opportunity, but also, as Russ said, it is scary. Because the number of cryptocurrencies, if you look at as of 2019, there were 3,000 different cryptocurrencies. And it went to 4,000 in 2020. And what is it now? It is over 12,000 in 2020-21. Because a lot of tokens, as Dori said, a lot of tokens have been created on top of the different platforms, right? Ethereum and Binance. And so that is very exciting because one thing that we, as you said, consumer protection and consumer credit access, there are 1.7 billion people around the globe who don't have a bank account. They are unbanked. They have been excluded from the financial system. But 2/3 of these people actually have a cell phone. And so they could make payment on their phone. And we have seen this development more in developing countries because they don't have, it's much easier to leapfrog our system because they didn't have a well-established payment system. So we see in Kenya, in India, in China, like earlier, Alipay, WeChat Pay was pretty much everywhere. And so this gives a lot more people opportunity to be included in the financial system. And that's what I'm really excited about. One thing also is that if you look at volatility, not only growth in volume in the type of currencies, but we saw that Bitcoin price went from 3,000 to 60,000 in 2 years. And Doji coin had over 1,000 returns. So it is scary because we don't know what's coming next. A lot of people may become wealthy through these cryptocurrencies, but some people lost their shirts, right? So it is difficult, and because it's so new, and we are still trying to understand, and people are home now, they want to invest in something. So it is important that people get enough sufficient financial education and understand, and I think Russ would agree with that people need to understand what they're investing, put their money in, and they have to diversify. One more thing that I wanted to talk to add to is the DeFi. That the great thing about DeFi is that there is no single point of failure, right? So it's more resilient that way. And it's harder to hack. So there are pros and cons to all these new things that are being innovated. Smart contracts, you said, an example. I heard of a good example of smart contract. Say if you take a car loan and you don't make your monthly payment, the car would stop allowing you to drive and it would just drive itself to the dealer or something like that. That could happen, the future of smart contract. So yeah, it is very exciting, it is scary, and all the information is out there. But given that you don't know, 2,000 people have our information, but with this DeFi, where information is everywhere, it is much harder to, even if someone steals your password or your date of birth or something, it's difficult to actually hack and steal. Although a lot of cryptocurrencies have been stolen, and from what I heard, 20% of cryptocurrency currently they call ghosts. Means people either lost their private key or something, and sometimes the custodian actually died, and nobody knows where the key is saved. And so the key went and died in India. There was one of the famous case. And so people lost money easily that way. So it is very important that we all understand what they're doing.
So I think what you raised sort of raises a broader question as so much changes, and we observe what the weaknesses are in the system, right? So one weakness right now is you lose your key or somebody dies. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what new companies sort of arise and start up to fill these needs, because I think that you will see that, and that's what makes it in part such an interesting space. But again, we're sort of getting into a lot of details, and I want to go back to something that Russ said a few minutes ago, talking about sort of the value proposition here, and Dori talked about it as well. Like, why is this such an important space? It's because there are things that we can do via blockchain, via smart contracts that we couldn't do with the old technology. And this point arises from a question from the audience, and I think it's really worth highlighting. So somebody asked, what exactly is it that makes blockchain or crypto better than the current technology solutions? What is it exactly that enables smart contracts? What can be done with blockchain that can't be done currently? Does one of you maybe have an example that just highlights what is the power of this? Russ or Adele, I don't know if it's a company you work with where you've seen this, or Dori in your own space. I'm going to put it out to whoever thinks they could, in very simple terms, explain this.
I know Dori loves this space, so I'll give him the first swing at the plate.
Perfect. Dori, it's all yours.
Yeah, so I am a crypto enthusiast, so you're not wrong. So yeah, I think that there's a ton of kind of awesome utilities for it. And the one that has stood out to me are NFTs. And the reason why NFTs work is because of blockchain technology, because of the transparency, the security, and the ability to basically claim ownership over something via blockchain technology. And the way that
pause. What's an NFT?
So yeah, I'll get into that. So the most digestible definition that I give to people who might not be familiar with the space when I describe an NFT is that it is digital artwork that lives on the blockchain. And this artwork can come in the form of GIFs. It can come in the form of JPEGs. It can come in the form of movie tickets and concert tickets. We've seen some very famous performers sell VIP passes via an NFT because the way blockchain basically enables the NFTs to kind of claim ownership. So when you own an NFT, nobody else can own that NFT, and it is represented through, a transactional hash on the blockchain. And so NFTs have been incredibly explosive. OpenSea, which is it's not the only one, but it is one of the bigger platforms for NFTs. I think it is the biggest one. Had $3.4 billion worth of transactional volume in the month of August. And I think it's important to note that all of that volume comes in the form of cryptocurrency. People are using their cryptocurrency to buy these NFTs. And then you look at kind of the next iteration is now people are like, all right, we've got NFTs, what can we do with them? And you've got video games that are embedding NFTs into their platforms. And so people are now using their NFTs in video games. And so the biggest NFT-based video game that came out is Axie Infinity. It has over 1 million daily active users, and it hit a $3 billion equity valuation. People are using and buying their NFTs, and they are using them in the video game. And when they play with these NFTs, these video game-based NFTs, they're winning prizes in the form of cryptocurrency, in the form of other NFTs. They can design their NFT. And then when they're done with that NFT, they can sell it to someone else who can then buy it and use it in the video game. And all of this is possible because of blockchain technology. And these are just like, for me, from my perspective, these are some of the fun kind of utilities and innovations being used by, with NFTs and in the NFT space and in the blockchain space and with cryptocurrency. And we talked about companies using cryptocurrency as a way to kind of issue, prizes. I forget the word that was used. This is just, kind of the next iteration of utility. And so I'm really excited about NFTs and the way they work, because number one, digital artists specifically, have always been incredibly undervalued, underpaid. And now they have an opportunity to make money, as they very much deserve. And, I think Russ mentioned Bitcoin as a collector's item. There is a lot of that aspect coming into this. And because that when you buy an NFT, assuming it's a one of one, or even if it's 50 out of 50, nobody else can buy that NFT. You own it. And if someone wants it from you, they have to come and buy it from you. And when they come and buy it from you, they're using cryptocurrency. So I'm pretty excited about that space.
Yeah. And I think Dori highlights kind of one opportunity that's different. And I think the other area that I think is super interesting, and I have a personal interest in it because I've always wanted to own a Ferrari, but can never afford one. And so, the tokenization of assets in the market and leveraging crypto and blockchain to facilitate participation in the purchasing of those assets is, I think, something that blockchain and digital infrastructure allows that the traditional infrastructure has not allowed. And so there are many companies now that facilitate, whether it's exotic cars like a Ferrari or others, or real estate assets or others. And it's the tokenization of those assets, getting back to Dori's comment around a tokenized asset, where we can tokenize that. And now I can own a fractional share of a Ferrari that exists within, Italy somewhere. And as that asset appreciates, I can participate in that in a very transparent, secure, and visible way. And I think, whereas, that was relegated to a very select few who have a lot more zeros in their net worth than I do. And I think it's a way, again, getting back to this democratization of finance and accessibility. And I thought, you know, the conversation around the unbanked is one end of the spectrum as well, and critically important, but it's also making things accessible to people that were never accessible before and participating in that, whether it's artists creating, you know, great opportunities in a space, or it's those that want to participate in different types of vehicles, you know, to invest in. I think that the blockchain and digital assets are making that available. I think, you know, getting back to some of the conversations around kind of the regulatory framework, I think right now it's a little bit of a, I'll say a Wild West in terms of kind of, you know, there's so much out there and so much emerging, and new coins emerge every day. And I think that creates a bit of, you know, uncertainty and kind of like, where is this heading? And I want to make sure I put my capital in the right spot. You know, if you're a retail kind of consumer and investor. But I think when you think about as that translates to the enterprise, and where, you know, large enterprises like a Vanguard, SEI, and others live, is how do we institutionalize that? How do we make it feel comfortable? How do we make it feel secure? How do we make it feel like it's part of their everyday? And so it feels like a traditional mutual fund. It feels like an ETF. It feels like I can talk to my financial advisor about it. It shows up on my statements, shows up in my 401k, you know, those types of things. And so there's kind of multiple ends of the spectrum as well, where it's like, oh, cool, I can invest in a Ferrari, but it's also like, how do I make this part of my retirement? And what is the right thing to do relative to that, you know, in lieu of Jamie Dimon's comments, you know, that type of thing.
Okay, so fantastic, great. So lots of examples of value propositions, whether it's to eliminate the middleman versus DeFi, whether it's to invest in digital art, which is good for both the artist and the collector, whether it's to invest in something via small fractional ownership like a Ferrari that perhaps not everybody can afford the whole thing. I'm never going to have enough time to follow up on everything I want to, but I do think one question that comes up a lot in the NFT space, and one of our participants, I think, phrased it perfectly. So what exactly is the benefit of owning a video clip that's already being widely disseminated, right? So this is a question we hear all the time. Sure, I can go buy an NFT of Michael Jordan or whoever your favorite basketball star is dunking, or I could just download one for free. And sure, I'm the only one that owns it, but why do I care if everybody else has it for free? A lot of times we think of value coming from a limit in supply, but those same economics don't work quite right here. So Dori, this is your space. So I'm turning it over to you here.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fair question. The way I will answer it is by using an example. And the example I'll give is traditional, you know, high quality art. So take the Mona Lisa, for example. There's only one original Mona Lisa. And anyone can take that Mona Lisa, not the original, but they can take a copy of it and they can create a very, you know, similar example and put it on their wall, and they can tell people that it is the original. And honestly, unless you're someone who knows the difference and can read the original Mona Lisa, they're not going to tell you that you're wrong. They might believe you. And so, but there's only one original Mona Lisa.
I don't know, the Mona Lisa might be a stretch in the belief department, but
that's fair. But people still have copies, you know, you can still access the Mona Lisa online. You can still look at it. It's not kind of a hidden, closed off thing. And so what blockchain does with digital art is it allows a way to prove that this is the one of one original piece of art. And so in the Michael Jordan case, if Michael Jordan came out and sold this dunk as an NFT, it would have a transactional hash that is stuck to that piece of art. And it'd be, you know, a line of words or, you know, letters and numbers. And that person who buys it would always be able to prove, and the whole world would transparently be able to see that this person owns that piece of art. And it's proved through blockchain technology. So that's just the example I'll give in terms of proof of ownership. What NFTs allow you to do is prove your ownership, and there's only one. So yes, other people can go and view it, but this is the most transparent way of proving that I have the one of one original issued, you know, piece of art that was minted to the blockchain. And so, yeah.
I think that's a perfect answer. And right at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there that are exactly, you know, equally content with a copy of the Mona Lisa or whatever it is. And there are other people that pay millions of dollars for the original. It doesn't have to be that we all have the same preferences. So, but clearly, you know, getting this point across and publicizing and sort of, I don't know, convincing people or whatever is one challenge in the NFT space. Let's go back a little bit to the big picture. All of us who work in this space see challenges, lots of them. It's a new area. There's lots of uncertainty. I'd love to hear just about what are the big challenges that you all are running into. And Adele, let me maybe start with you. So it could be something for your company specifically, something you see with the bigger companies, the startup companies, anything. I'm going to put you in that sort of choose one of 20 probably space again, but any thoughts?
No, it's a great question. And, you know, I always love being in innovation because it's always exciting. And I also remind people it takes a long time to, you know, be real. The innovation cycle is a lot longer than you think, and stuff doesn't just usually go viral overnight. And I think the challenge here, as regulation is starting to come to the forefront, right? And we keep seeing the changes there. And, you know, we see comments that it's not a thing and it is a thing. It's really confusing to a lot of people. But the thing is the data shows, right? They're expecting, what was it? I think by 2026, the market cap in crypto is going to be 40 trillion. Like, they just see this exponential growth. The data shows we're moving in a direction that's a little disruptive and it's a little uncomfortable as we all get used to what that is. And so I think it's about finding valid use cases that are digestible, that people can slowly start to understand and get familiar with this, right? I mentioned earlier, PayPal and Venmo, they saw 2 times, their users became twice as active as soon as they could do anything with cryptocurrency on their platform. The trends are there. Making those bite-sized use cases understandable and getting market adoption is a long-term thing. So if someone today is like, well, it's just everything's going to hit overnight, it's a different, highly disruptive way with a volatile market, right? It's going to take time to level out. So for me, it's been, how do you take something with so much possibilities and make it applicable today, and to really start that user adoption journey? And I'd be really interested to know, not to what Dori has to say on this, because, you know, doing something so new, that's a lot of user adoption, but I'll pause there. For me, it's been use cases that are bite-sized today that make sense.
Yeah, the bite size, so you can explain it to people. There's such a lack of knowledge and a lot of misunderstanding in this space. And if you're a company trying to raise money, being able to explain in simple terms what you do is far more difficult than you might think. And I see Russ nodding vigorously, but hey, you know, Adele's doing my moderator job for me. Dori, it's your turn. So jump right in here.
Yeah, so I think the hardest thing for us, and probably for the space, is the front end in terms of how easy it is to get into cryptocurrency. And right now there is kind of a high barrier to entry. There's a lot of innovation going on in the back end, but the front end seems to be kind of getting ignored, and it's equally as important. And so until it's very, very easy to get into cryptocurrency, get cryptocurrency into your wallet, buy it, transact with it, use it on these platforms, it's going to be kind of difficult for people to adopt it, because it's just going to be hard. It's hard. Like, the concept is hard enough to understand, and then it's arguably even harder to use and figure out. And so that, I think, is the toughest question that the space needs to answer, is how are we going to make it easier, more digestible, and the front end UX UI design of all of these platforms, the wallets, the apps. I think Coinbase has done the best job at this, and they've brought a lot of people into the space, but that's only cryptocurrency. Now, what are you going to do with your cryptocurrency? How are you going to use it? Well, now those entities and those apps need to figure out how to make that much easier. And so I think that is probably the toughest situation right now that we face.
Yeah.
So let me bring in one of the audience questions, because I think it really pertains what we're talking about here. One of the sources of confusion is just that we do have so many of these digital currencies, right? Like, I'm still trying to understand Bitcoin, and now you tell me that there's 19,999 others that I'm supposed to understand as well. Like, you're kidding me, right? And so an audience member says there's about 200 global hard currency, but 20,000 digital, going higher. Do you think there'll be consolidation at some point in the future? And Anybody's welcome to answer. Julapa, I know you work a lot on sort of the regulator and the big picture banking, so I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yes. So yes, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies, and as you said, it's 12,000 now. And yes, it's going to rise with new tokens being introduced every hour. Keep in mind that thousands of these cryptocurrencies have already failed, and many of these would also fail. And the volatility in this market actually have also led to other innovations like stable coin, right? That the value would be pegged to certain fiat currency or something that we know the value. So I wanted to, just an example, the Libra initially. So we had at the Philadelphia Fed, we have this annual FinTech conference every year, and last year it was virtual, but and so this year too. So we had a big session on cryptocurrencies and digital currencies, and so we had the vice chair of the DM Association and the chief economist coming and talk about DM stable coin, and also we had the BIS and so central bankers talking about CBDC, central bank digital currencies. And at the end of the session, we asked what the moderator asked, what do you think these other cryptocurrency firms, would you like the central bank to introduce CBDC? Would they compete with you? And they all said no. They said actually they would like the central bank to create this rail so that they could build on top. And so it's like the Fed would build a train track and allow many different private organizations to actually run the train, right? To schedule the train and provide design the service. So I think that's kind of something that maybe different central bankers around the globe may be considering. And in that case, that would be, the number should shrink significantly. So we'll be on the same rail, but there'll be like currently Hyperledger, right? But now it will be a central bank rail, and it will be all real time. And which is the Fed is actually creating this Fed now, which you probably have heard. There'll be real time payment that would actually, it's taking a little longer to implement this, but it will be in 2020-23. But because we have 6,000 banks, and we want our large banks and small banks to actually be able to do all this. And so the interoperability is something that we need to work on carefully. And but at that time, everyone should just be able to kind of, what we are doing with WhatsApp Pay, just kind of immediately send a text and you get the payment is transferred, at least within the US. And what blockchain could do with DM, that DM is doing, is not only within the US, but also cross-border, that you can send money throughout the world. So I think that's it, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, real-time payments is a huge issue. We hear about it all the time. I'm not sure it's commonly recognized exactly how far we are from real-time payment in our current state of the world. Do you have any sort of top of the mind statistics just for the audience of exactly how long does it take to do like an international transaction or even just domestic?
Yeah, so it's not cross-border, definitely is there are frictions, and that's why that's actually the primary reason when cryptocurrencies started being created, with the goal to actually make it improve, eliminate frictions in the payment system. But I will have to remind you all that trust is a very important ingredient in payment in cryptocurrency. And so that's one of the reasons why it might be a good idea for government or central bank to be involved either as an operator or just a supporting role, but something.
Yeah, I think reasons related to trust, and also just like you were saying, the common rails, right? Like if trains can't transfer from one set of rails to another, we've got a lot of inefficiencies in the system, and that's where the
Yes.
government can really provide value, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so lots of challenges here that we're bringing up. We could go on, though. I do have a question from the audience about this that I think is really interesting. So this person asked about GDPR. So you've got the privacy regulations, right, in Europe, and there are other similar ones as well. How do we deal with that on the blockchain, right? So if somebody puts some information on the blockchain, it is by definition there permanently. And now somebody says, oh, wait, that's my information. I don't want it on there. How do we deal with that kind of thing? Russ, is this something that you've run into with some of the companies that you work with?
Yeah, there's certainly some companies out there that I think are looking at, and I'll broadly classify it as, data privacy, data protection. I'll even put identification management, and then it even starts to trail into kind of the RegTech space with AML and KYC. And I think what Julapa was starting to allude to, especially with cross-border payments, you start to get into a lot of the areas around anti-money laundering, KYC, and then the regulatory frameworks within those jurisdictions that manage data privacy, data protections, data residency. So certain jurisdictions require in residency within their domicile with their data. And by no means a data privacy expert, but we have a team that's really focused keenly on that. But we're certainly seeing startups within the space that are trying to address those very things around data privacy and data protections within blockchain and identity management. And that starts to blur that line between kind of RegTech, data protection, and identity management, as well as data protection. So whether it's California's requirements in terms of data privacy or GDPR, I think the question is a well-framed question, and frankly, from my seat, I don't see specific details relative to that, but we're certainly seeing startups seeking to try to address that.
Great. Okay, so this hour is flying by. We have just a few minutes left. I'd like to provide each one of our panelists the opportunity to just talk about, what do you see down the road? So if you were going to make a prediction for 5 years from now that nobody's going to hold you to, your wealth does not depend on whether this prediction comes true or not. What do you think will be, where will we be, or what will be a big surprise, or where do you think like a lot of development could be? Anything that you sort of think about for the longer term horizon. And I've sort of have consistently gone, let's start with the small kind of person operating and go to the big picture. I'm going to reverse things now. So Julapa, from the regulator perspective, like, where do you think is it, what would be your 5-year call?
5 years from now, I can't even predict 6 months from now, but
you get to answer the question you want. So you can tell me my question's no fair.
Yeah, sure, I will try. But by the way, but on the GDPR, the data sharing, the goal is really to because all this data that has been collected is consumer data, but we have no control. The goal is to try to give this control back to consumers, the owner of the data, right? There are issues that as we try to make people say opt in or opt out, right? People don't usually read this long agreement. They just basically click on their phone and just so that they can just load the app and get my things done. So that's one thing that we need to be, I want to remind everyone that that has to be careful. Another thing is the right to be forgotten. I don't think that that would be possible. And at least that's currently the technology hasn't allowed us. There's a big tech, Google, for example, has all our search trail and all the information about how we buy things and everything. And so once it's out there, so many copies are made. How are we going to make it forgettable? It's just, I think that's one big question that I want to leave for everyone to think about.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think that's an area that we will see lots of changes in over the upcoming years. Russ, how about you?
Yeah, I think, and we started to touch on a little bit, is the proliferation exists today, and kind of where do we see it in 5 years? And I say proliferation from whether it's coins, whether it's infrastructure technologies, digital wallets for the consumers, I think you're seeing such a broad spectrum, and I really try to parallel this if people could think back to 1999, 2000, with the emergence of the internet and e-commerce. And with the explosion of e-commerce, there was a lot of amazing e-commerce sites that emerged that no longer exist. So to Julia's point, you've seen cryptocurrencies emerge and disappear, in months type of thing. And so you saw this huge emergence. And then you also equally saw an infrastructure that emerged to support that e-commerce capabilities. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing in this space as well. And no different from then, you're going to see leaders emerge and infrastructure technology emerge to support that. And so I think you're going to see a mass consolidation, both in terms of the number of currencies available in kind of the crypto space and digital and tokenization. But I also think you're going to see a mass consolidation on the infrastructure side, because eventually, again, imagine 2000, if some of us were alive then, purchasing products over the internet, and how there was this uncertainty and trust and kind of is that company going to be around to even ship my goods? And then as evolution and standards evolved in terms of security and funding and things of that nature, I think that's what you're going to see, this major shift. And to Dori's comment, I think eventually you'll see, then with our debit cards, with our credit cards, to be able to pay in cryptocurrencies and not have it to be converted from fiat to something else.
Yeah. So yeah, we're growing up here, right? We're still in the toddler stages of things, or maybe even not quite there yet. Yeah. Adele, how about you?
Yeah, this is Adele's answer.
I know, I want to hear.
But I think we will be a little more mainstream today, but I think due to the nature of this and the possibilities, I think this is a really long cycle time innovation, right? I think of how long it really took us to go away from the phones that were in bags and cars to the iPhone today. That was a long cycle. And I'm not saying it's that long, but I think this is just going to be something that continually evolves. And I don't think we'll be in the mainstream. So I think we'll still have panels like this discussing changes. And I think we'll have a little more regulation to help a little more get some running lanes that, really helps accelerate additional companies. But I think it's a long innovation cycle. And I think we're still going to be having panels like this saying, where's it going to be? Because I think we're still going to be figuring it out. So it might not be popular. It's an exciting space. I just think we're in a long cycle kind of development process.
So we should all make calendar invites for many years from now, huh?
I think we should. It's a great topic, and it'll continue to evolve.
Well, it's recorded, and we can play it back and see whose predictions came true.
Oh gosh, you can't say that. I still have to ask Dori. Now he's not going to want to say anything. Dori, what's your long-term prediction?
So I think all the answers that were previously given are great, and I think they're probably exactly right. I would say that right now what's happened is that cryptocurrencies have kind of been thrust onto all of us, and now the infrastructure is playing catch up, and the innovations that are coming with blockchain are happening in response to crypto, and I think that'll actually switch. And I think that blockchain technology will be answering the questions for us, and people will be figuring out ways to kind of embed and assign utility to crypto and figure out where it fits into this space based on the blockchain technology that's built, as opposed to what's happening right now, which is pretty much the opposite. So
I think that's perfectly put. There are people within many companies that are trying to figure out exactly that. And I think they have a long job ahead of time. Okay, well, a huge thank you to everybody, Dori, Russ, Adele, Julapa. This was really great. Let me turn it back over to Dean, who I think has some logistical details for us. But again, just from my perspective, a huge thanks. This was a fascinating discussion.
Michelle, and expertly moderated by you. This is not an easy lift given all the different areas this applies to, and still a lot of questions. So Michelle, to you and to the rest of the panelists, thank you. And to everybody who's participated here with some great questions, really appreciate it. Again, want to thank our sponsors, SEI, Vanguard, and Baker Tilly. And now the moment you've been waiting for, to continue the conversation. You can get a little more granular if you like. And in your chat bar right now, you just saw the Remo link appear. So all you need to do is click on that, and it'll take you right over to the Remo chat room where you'll be joining tables. You can move around. All you need to do is double click to, again, join a specific table and continue the conversation. once again, I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers and all of you, and look forward to seeing you at a future packed event. On that front, we are in person for our Capital Conference. Vaccinations required on November 3rd and 4th. The big gala party will be on the evening of the 3rd and the conference on the 4th. With that, I will ask everybody to click on the chat, click on to Remo, and head on over. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.